The series kicks off by introducing a quiet guy named Yoon-soo. He's just moved into a rundown apartment complex called Green Home. Yoon-soo seems like a young man who's lost his way in life. He is an antisocial individual and doesn't really care about what's happening around him. Even when the apartment complex security guard tries to talk to him, Yoon-soo brushes him off. Once he settles into his apartment, he even goes up to the rooftop with some troubling thoughts on his mind. However, his plan gets interrupted when he accidentally spots a girl named Eun-yu dancing ballet. Shortly after, Eun-yu stops her dance, disturbed by Yoon-soo's gaze, while Yoon-soo hurried back to his room without introducing himself. He then noticed the apartment security guard acting strangely again. The guard was peeking into his room with a nosebleed. Feeling suspicious, Yoon-soo went into his room, but the guard held the door and insisted that Yoon-soo hadn't filled out his moving-in registration form. Yoon-soo lied, saying he would do it later. The scene then shifts to another resident of the apartment, a girl named Ji-soo. She's a talented musician. While waiting for the elevator to go to work, Ji-soo accidentally crosses paths with a woman pushing an empty baby carriage. This confused Ji-soo, but a guy named Jae-hoon, who was also waiting for the elevator, explained to Ji-soo that the woman, Mi-young-suk, was acting strangely because she had lost her baby in an accident. The scene returns to show another apartment resident, a man with facial burn scars named Sung-guk Hee. Initially, there is nothing unusual about Sung-guk Hee, but it turns out there is a man being held captive in his room. Sung-guk Hee brutally interrogates the captive about something unknown. Sometime later, Yoon-soo is deep into an online game when he gets a message saying his ramen order has arrived. He goes to pick it up but accidentally witnesses something bizarre. A blood-covered hand picking up a cat's head from the floor. Terrified, he rushes back to his room. Then, he hears footsteps approaching, followed by a woman pleading for help. Yoon-soo looks at his monitor and sees a woman with a bleeding nose acting strangely, trying to get inside. Thankfully, she suddenly leaves when she hears Ji-soo playing music in her room. Ji-soo went to see who was knocking on her door, but she got a shock when she saw the woman had turned into something terrifying. Frightened, Ji-soo refused to open the door, which made the woman furious, banging on Ji-soo's door repeatedly. Terrified, Ji-soo then grabbed a baseball bat, but when she stepped outside, she unexpectedly ran into Sung-guk and saw the bloodstains on her door left by the woman. Ji-soo was left confused by the whole situation. The scene then shifts to a man named Eun-yu, who is Eun-soo's older brother. He's getting ready to leave with other apartment residents, including Ik-kyung and a few others in the lobby. Suddenly, they see a tall, bald man at the main door, someone they don't recognize. Shockingly, this bald man turns out to be a monster. He comes in and sticks a tentacle out of his mouth, attacking one of the residents until they die. This scares everyone, but Eun-yu bravely grabs a fire hose and sprays the monster. At the same time, Ik-kyung rushes to tackle the monster, trying to get him out of the apartment and securing the door with iron bars. Later on, a guy named Suk-yoon scolds Ik-kyung for her carelessness. He's a government worker and a firefighter, but Eun-yu explains that it's not just one creature. There are many of them outside the apartment. These scary monsters are going after humans. Meanwhile, Yoon-soo on the upper floor is looking outside, where everything is in chaos. Before long, he starts to bleed from his nose, showing early symptoms like the security guard. As time goes by, it becomes clear that the danger isn't just outside the apartment, because some of the people inside are already infected. Ji-soo is coming down the stairs when she encounters a man with early symptoms, nose bleeding. When he sees Ji-soo, he gets aggressive and tries to attack her. Luckily, Ji-soo has a baseball bat, and she hits the man on the head until he passes out. But when she checks on the guy she hit, she finds that he's turned into a horrifying monster who wants to eat her. Thankfully, Jae-hoon arrives and quickly takes care of the monster. Meanwhile, in the apartment lobby, all the scared residents are struggling to understand what's happening. Soon after, they get a message from the South Korean government explaining that there's an unexplained outbreak. The infected people show early signs like nosebleeds, passing out, and becoming aggressive. This message just adds to everyone's fear and confusion. 8 hours later, Yoon-soo, who had just found out he was infected, started searching the internet for information about his condition. He stumbled upon a blog discussing the issue, and the author claimed that this virus outbreak wasn't an epidemic, but more like a curse. This curse could turn people into monsters based on their desires and fears. While Yoon-soo was looking for a cure, the internet suddenly went down and he had to leave his room. But he got startled when he saw the monster that Jae-hoon had knocked down, which surprisingly was still alive despite having only half a head from Jae-hoon's attack. The monster had super sharp hearing. So Yoon-soo tried to stay as still as possible until the monster left. Meanwhile, Ji-soo and Jae-hoon, aware of the situation, suddenly heard a strange noise coming from Sunguk's room. As they got closer, they realized it wasn't a monster, but a man who had been held captive by Sunguk. They had no idea what happened to the man, so they set him free. His name was Chun-yong. After that, they also found out that some of the scared residents in the apartment had decided to do the unthinkable. Returning to Yoon-soo, who had managed to escape from the blind monster, he heard two children crying for help after their dad was eaten by the monster. At first, Yoon-soo tried to help, but he started to have doubts and acted like he didn't care. Out of the blue, the monster attacked Yoon-soo, leaving him feeling helpless and trapped. Thankfully, a guy named Do-sik came to the rescue and attacked the monster with a homemade weapon. Yoon-soo's doubts about saving the two children disappeared when he realized that Do-sik, who had helped him, was a disabled man with a strong fighting spirit and the bravery to help others. Feeling more courageous now, Yoon-soo asked Do-sik to make an electric weapon for him. Once they put the weapon together, Yoon-soo went downstairs to rescue the two children. But the elevator he got into suddenly stopped because the power went out. On top of that, he ran into the blind monster again, blocking his path, which led to a showdown between Yoon-soo and the blind monster. However, Yoon-soo cleverly made the blind monster fall, allowing him to get to the room where the two children were. Meanwhile, Eun-yug, who was really smart, had already figured out the electrical problem. He asked Ik-yeon, the firefighter, for help in turning on the basement electrical switch. Now let's get back to Yoon-soo, who was trying to get the two children to safety. Suddenly, he felt something strange and his nose started bleeding again. It reminded him of his past when he lost his whole family because of a mistake he made. While he was feeling faint, Yoon-soo seemed to hear a voice saying that his alter ego could make everyone he hated disappear. A little later, Yoon-soo woke up and hugged the two children he was trying to save. They were scared because of a huge monster trying to attack them. Seeing this, Yoon-soo, who now had a half-monster appearance, tried to hold back the giant monster so that the two children could get away. Unfortunately, the giant monster was incredibly strong, and it pushed Yoon-soo back, giving him a powerful hit. Luckily, Ji-soo and Jae-hoon arrived to help him. But Yoon-soo was more worried about the two children, so he asked Ji-soo and Jae-hoon to help him rescue them from the blind monster. Before long, the giant monster showed up, and the blind monster attacked it. They had a fierce fight, but the giant monster won and then went after the kids to eat them. Surprisingly, Mi-young-sug, the woman who had been pushing the baby carriage, bravely stood up to the giant monster to protect the children. Meanwhile, the people in the lobby got a live broadcast from the president of South Korea, warning everyone that the monsters were extremely dangerous. Around the same time, Ik-yeon, who was looking for the electrical switch, got caught by a spider-like monster. While Mi-young-sug was bravely facing the giant monster, she ended up becoming a victim of it. This showed that what the president had talked about was now a reality. In fact, the president got infected during his live broadcast, and the military had to kill him right away. This meant that the military would eliminate anyone showing symptoms of the monster outbreak. The apartment residents who saw this got even more scared. Back to Yoon-soo and the others who had reached where the two children were. They saw the giant monster attacking Mi-young-sug. Yoon-soo told the children to come to him, and the giant monster went after the children again. Surprisingly, Mi-young-sug was still alive because she had the desire to save the children, and that made her turn into a half-monster. She immediately attacked the giant monster. Seeing this, Ji-soo told Yoon-soo to take the children while she and Jae-hoon would deal with the giant monster. Jae-hoon had a plan and led the giant monster away. Later, Jisoo went to Myung-suk and saw that her wounds were healing on their own, with Myung-suk still had her human consciousness. At the same time, Jae-hoon succeeded in leading the giant monster fall out of the green home apartment. They relaxed and had a meal that Myung-soo prepared. After they ate, Yoon-soo, who thought he might turn into a monster, asked Jisoo to kill him because he didn't want to hurt anyone else. But Jisoo refused to do it, thinking that Yoon-soo wouldn't transform. Meanwhile, in the apartment lobby, the remaining residents started trying to buy food from Suk-hyun's store, but he wouldn't sell it to anyone. Then they heard an announcement from Eun-yug, telling all the apartment residents to gather in the lobby and bring anything they could use as a weapon, because it was the safest thing to do. Surprisingly, a woman named Jinog insisted on removing the iron bar because she wanted to leave. Her daughter was on her way back from school, and she wanted to be there when she arrived. Eun-yug initially refused, but after Jinog kept begging, he finally allowed her to do it. Soon after, Jinog saw her daughter running towards her, and a soldier, who was a friend of Lee-hyun, tried to help her. Sadly, the bald monster was still alive and ended up killing both of them. Back to Yoon-soo, who heard Eun-yug's announcement. He, along with Jisoo and Jae-hoon, decided to go downstairs to make sure that Do-sik, Myung-suk, and the others were safe from the monsters. The scene then shifts to other survivors, a beautiful woman named Yuri, and her grandfather named Gil-sop. Despite the scary situation, they seemed calm and ready to face any danger. Back in the apartment lobby, after the sad event that led to Jinog's daughter's death, Eun-yug was chosen to be the leader of the apartment residents. He immediately told all the guys in the lobby to make a barrier to stop something like that from happening again. Meanwhile, Lee-hyun, who had seemed to be a victim of the spider-like monster earlier, was still alive and trying to get away from the spider monster. Luckily, Lee-hyun had above-average physical abilities, and with her strength, she managed to escape from the spider monster. When she got to the lobby, she asked Eun-yug why he didn't tell her about the monsters in the basement. Soon after, the military sent a live broadcast saying that all the people who were still alive should get rid of anyone who had entered the hallucination phase and showed signs of being infected by the monster outbreak. They said this phase was the last stage before turning into a full monster. Not long after, the green home residents got really scared when they saw Yoon-soo falling from above, but he healed quickly. Suk-hyun then asked everyone to get Yoon-soo out of the apartment. But Eun-yug saw what was happening and suggested they vote on what to do with Yoon-soo later. When they voted, some residents wanted Yoon-soo to stay, while others wanted him to leave. But Suk-hyun wasn't happy with the vote, and he convinced everyone to keep telling Yoon-soo to leave. Suddenly, Suk-hyun started bleeding from his nose right in front of everyone, which meant he had been infected by the monster outbreak. But he asked to be quarantined instead of being kicked out, even though he had told them to kick out Yoon-soo, who was also infected. Not long after, Suk-hyun had a question for Yoon-soo about how to stay in control and not lose his mind, but Yoon-soo didn't answer. Then, Eun-yug decided that everyone who was infected by the monster outbreak should be put in a closed room. He also told the male residents to take turns guarding the isolation area. The scene then shows Sung-dug, who got really mad when he saw Chun-yong. He attacked Chun-yong and hurt him badly. Luckily, Chun-yong pretended to be infected by the monster outbreak and asked to be quarantined, just like Yoon-soo and Suk-hyun had done. Meanwhile, Eun-yug noticed the shield that Jae-hoon was carrying and asked who made it. He thought that person could be helpful in making the apartment lobby more secure. Jae-hoon explained that Do-sik made the shield, and he was still on the upper floor with the two children and Myung-suk. On the other hand, Do-sik was busy making another weapon when he got word from the two children that Myung-suk had been in the bathroom for a long time. This raised his suspicion, and he hurriedly opened the bathroom door. To his shock, he found Myung-suk had already transformed into a cocoon, on her way to becoming a full-fledged monster. Despite being ready to kill her, Do-sik couldn't do it, remembering the good times they had together. Meanwhile, in the apartment lobby, Eun-yug felt the urgency to save Do-sik and decided to use Yoon-soo, who had the ability to heal quickly, to go upstairs and bring Do-sik down. Yoon-soo accepted the task, even though there were unknown monsters on each floor that could pose a threat to his life. Eun-yu chose Yoon-soo because he believed anyone else would not survive the task. Eun-yu had actually manipulated all the votes among the apartment residents about Yoon-soo's fate using his intelligence. He knew that despite the danger Yoon-soo posed, he was the only one they could rely on. Eun-yu had read a blog about the monster outbreak before the chaos started, and he was aware of this. Ik-kyung, upon seeing the blog, then realized something. The blog belonged to her fiancé. As Yoon-soo prepared to head upstairs, he was joined by Sung-guk, who had his own destination in mind. When they entered a room, they were ambushed by a monster with long arms. Yoon-soo tried to help Sung-guk, but another fast-running monster appeared, trapping them. Just in the nick of time, Yu-ri and Gil-sop came to their rescue, allowing them to escape. Sung-guk was badly hurt and needed medical attention, but he declined Yu-ri's assistance and proceeded to Chun-young's room. Inside Chun-young's room, Sung-guk was horrified to discover that Chun-young was a ruthless criminal who targeted young women for heinous crimes. Outraged, Sung-guk returned to the lobby and killed Chun-young. He then offered Chun-young's body to the monsters outside. Afterward, Sung-guk brought the bodies of Jinok's daughter and a soldier, who was Ik-kyung's friend, into the apartment for a proper burial. He had initially intended sacrifice himself to the monster, but was stopped by Jae-hoon, who brought him back inside. Despite Sung-guk's impulsive actions, it brought some closure to Jinok, who could now bury her daughter properly. Jinok found solace in the two children saved by Yoon-soo as they reminded her of her daughter. With all the remaining residents gathered in the lobby, Eun-yu established a set of rules. Every night, residents had to check their body temperature, and food supplies were distributed according to need. Those showing signs of being infected were isolated at Eun-yu's orders, with no permission to leave the apartment. Specific tasks were assigned to each resident, such as Gil-sop monitoring the outside situation and reporting it, while Do-sik continued fortifying the entrances to enhance security. The challenging task of collecting resources and personal belongings from the upper floors was assigned to Yoon-soo. Meanwhile, Ik-kyung, convinced that the outbreak was linked to her fiancé, urged Eun-yu to allow her to investigate. She believed her findings could unlock the mystery behind the situation. As days passed, the residents in the apartment started adapting and cooperating with each other. Even Sung-guk, the former Mayfin member, now worked together with Eun-yu to manage the food supplies. However, their newfound sense of calm was shattered when they discovered that Suk-yoon had fully transformed into a monster, terrifying everyone. Soon-young, Suk-yoon's wife, was forced to kill her transformed husband, an act witnessed by Yoon-soo, leaving him fearful of a similar fate, despite having undertaken dangerous tasks for the residents. Meanwhile, Ik-kyung arrived at her fiancé's former workplace and found a laptop containing her fiancé's research archives. It revealed that he had been infected by the monster outbreak and had conducted secret research in a hidden location. Before Ik-kyung could delve into the research, military forces apprehended her. Back at Green Home, the situation grew tense again after Suk-yoon's death. Concerns arose that Yoon-soo might also transform into a monster, posing a threat. However, the two children remained steadfast in their belief that Yoon-soo, their savior, wouldn't harm them. Another issue surfaced when Eun-yu realized their water supply was running low, making the situation even more dire. Eun-yu requested Yoon-soo's help once more, asking him to check the situation outside to see if there was another place they could go, as Green Home was no longer suitable due to the dwindling water supply. On the other hand, Eun-yu, who was developing feelings for Yoon-soo, thought Eun-yu's treatment of him was too harsh, as if he didn't see Yoon-soo as human. Nevertheless, Yoon-soo continued to follow Eun-yu's orders and went alone to the basement where the spider monster lurked. There, the monster attacked Yoon-soo, knocking him out. This made Eun-yu, who felt guilty, along with Jisoo, Jae-hoon, and Sung-guk, rush to the basement to rescue Yoon-soo. To their surprise, they encountered the fast runner monster, which was sleeping and allowed them to save Yoon-soo. However, as they were about to leave, Jisoo felt stomach pain, dropped her weapon, and made a loud noise that woke up the fast runner monster. It immediately attacked Yoon-soo, sending him flying. Meanwhile, in the apartment lobby, The spider monster seemed to have intentionally attacked Yoon-soo to lure Eun-yuk and the others, then headed to the lobby to attack the remaining residents. The young girl saved by Yoon-soo became the spider monster's first target. In the basement, Eun-yuk used his intelligence to injure the fast runner monster. When the monster was about to attack Eun-yuk again, Jae-hoon used a car to ram into it and then led everyone away. However, the noise from the car attracted other monsters and halted their escape. In this dire situation, Jil-sop arrived with a flamethrower, which engulfed the monsters in flames. In the lobby, everyone banded together to thwart the spider monster's attack on the young girl. Not long after, Yoon-soo successfully killed the spider monster with his weapon. Afterward, he intended to return to isolation, but all the residents now believed he wouldn't harm them and apologized for putting him in danger for their own sake. Yoon-soo smiled, feeling accepted by everyone. However, they still faced the problems of water shortage and depleting food supplies. Eun-yuk then asked Do-sik to modify a car for a food search mission, and he chose Sung-guk for the task, believing him to be the most capable. Sung-guk was initially hesitant to follow Eun-yuk's dangerous orders, but eventually agreed after seeing the other residents' willingness. The next day, before Sung-guk left on the mission, another problem arose when Ji-soo experienced severe abdominal pain and lost consciousness. Eun-yuk, who had medical knowledge, diagnosed Ji-soo with appendicitis, requiring urgent surgery. Unfortunately, there were no medical instruments or medications in the apartment for the operation. Eun-yuk discussed the situation with the others, hoping to find someone to accompany Sung-guk in search of food and medical supplies for Ji-soo's surgery. Jae-hoon, who was close to Ji-soo, volunteered to go with Sung-guk. However, Eun-yuk refused, as he needed Jae-hoon to guard the operating room against monster attacks. Instead, Yoon-soo willingly offered to accompany Sung-guk. Yu-ri, a pharmacist, also offered to join the mission, leading Gil-sop to accompany her. As the four of them prepared to leave, the remaining residents did their best to assist in Ji-soo's surgery. Before departing, Eun-yuk, who was usually selfish, whispered to Yoon-soo that their top priority was not food but finding medication for Ji-soo. Yoon-soo was determined to return safely with the necessary medication for Ji-soo. During this time, Yoon-soo recalled a dark memory that had caused him to become withdrawn. In the past, he was a cheerful person, but a small mistake had drastically changed his life. In school, he tried to help a fellow student named Do-hoon who was struggling to buy a canned drink, but his good intentions were misunderstood by Do-hoon. Since that day, Yoon-soo had endured constant bullying by his classmates, all orchestrated by Do-hoon. This eventually prompted Yoon-soo to gather the courage to confront Do-hoon and ask why he was being subjected to such treatment. Do-hoon explained that he felt embarrassed by Yoon-soo's offer of help. Seeking support from his parents, Yoon-soo discovered that Do-hoon's father owned the company where his own father worked, leading his parents to ignore his school troubles. Even his sister disowned him, denying their relationship to her friends. Do-hoon further isolated him by instructing everyone not to interact with Yoon-soo, leaving him friendless and alone. One day, Yoon-soo witnessed Do-hoon bullying another student and confronted him in a fit of rage, nearly causing a car accident. This incident resulted in his father losing his job, and Yoon-soo's family pressured him to apologize to Do-hoon to secure his father's reinstatement. Tragically, on their way to meet Do-hoon, they were involved in a fatal accident that claimed their lives. Yoon-soo was left with the painful memories, but he was now determined to change and be there for people who needed him. As they were leaving the apartment in a car, a giant monster, larger and more evolved, suddenly attacked, causing the vehicle to swerve. Sung-guk and Yu-ri lost consciousness, leaving Yoon-soo alone. He tried to fight the formidable monster, but was overpowered and thrown back. Just as he was about to be attacked again, Jil-sop intervened by using a Molotov cocktail, slowing down the giant monster. Jil-sop, however, displayed early signs of monster infection and decided to sacrifice himself so the others could escape. In a stroke of luck, a fire truck arrived and rammed into the giant monster, sending it tumbling into a ravine. The truck was driven by Lee-kyung, had saved Gil-sop and Yoon-soo. Though their lives were spared, they had to turn back and couldn't continue their journey. On the other hand, Eun-yuk successfully performed a risky surgery on Ji-soo, even without proper medical equipment or drugs, relieving her suffering. Ik-young arrived with much-needed food and clean water, resolving the apartment's pressing issues. As time passed, Jae-hoon and Sung-guk developed a close friendship, providing companionship for Sung-guk, who had always been alone. Later, Ik-young met with Yoon-soo and cut his hand to check his regenerative abilities. She revealed that the military had discharged her because they were searching for someone infected for over 15 days, a rare and special creature believed to be able to stop the monster outbreak. Ik-young initially hesitated to cooperate with the military, fearing it would jeopardize the apartment residents' safety. However, they offered her a chance to reunite with her fiancé, especially since she was now pregnant. Reluctantly, she agreed to provide information about Yoon-soo to the military, though she still had doubts about it. Sometime later, anxiety gripped the apartment's residents again when Soon-young started to develop the symptoms and entered the hallucination stage. Although the residents decided not to isolate her, Soon-young insisted on doing so out of fear that she might harm others. Meanwhile, Eun-yu asked Yoon-soo to promise to take care of himself and survive. Yoon-soo was determined to make a fresh start and fight to save all the apartment residents, symbolizing this by cutting his hair. The story then shifted to Ik-young, who was feeling uncertain about a decision when she was startled by the sudden appearance of an exiled soldier. Eun-yu received the news and approached the exiled soldier. Shortly after, they heard an announcement on the exiled soldier's radio, warning of approaching bandits who intended to capture him. Concerned for their safety, Eun-yu instructed Yoon-soo and Sung-guk to release the SOS sign attached to the apartment. As they prepared to return, Yoon-soo noticed that the apartment security guard had turned into a monster and was heading for the lobby in the elevator. This alarmed Yoon-soo and Sung-guk, pushing them to rush to the lobby via the emergency staircase. However, they found that the staircase had been rigged with ropes to detect monsters, slowing them down. With no other choice, Yoon-soo jumped down, breaking his leg, but he still couldn't reach the lobby quickly. Meanwhile, the security guard, now a monster, had already arrived, terrifying everyone. Injured Jae-hoon reluctantly faced the security guard monster. Sadly, he lost his arm in the confrontation. With no better options, Jae-hoon decided to sacrifice himself by luring the security guard monster into the elevator, urging the others to kill the monster with him inside the elevator. The remaining residents couldn't bear to follow Jae-hoon's command, as they didn't want to see him sacrifice himself in vain. Eun-yu, reluctantly accepting the situation, threw a Molotov cocktail toward Jae-hoon, ending both Jae-hoon's life and the security guard monster's threat. The survivors of Green Home were deeply saddened by Jae-hoon's sacrifice, mourning his loss. Ji-soo, in particular, felt devastated as Jae-hoon had confessed his feelings for her before his death, feelings she had kept hidden. Eun-yu, also grieving, tried to comfort Ji-soo, providing some solace. Sung-guk, too, felt the weight of Jae-hoon's loss, believing that he had changed him for the better. Despite their collective sorrow, the residents couldn't dwell on their grief for long as a new problem emerged as a group of ruthless bandits approaching the Green Home apartment. These bandits, led by a man named Chong-sop, showed no mercy. They immediately killed the exiled soldier and one innocent resident. This sent terror through the remaining residents, who were forced to comply with the bandits' orders to gather in a circle they had formed. Meanwhile, Ik-young, who was observing from a distance, discreetly infiltrated the bandits' car to retrieve a suitcase they had with them. Yoon-soo, witnessing this, wanted to retaliate, but Eun-yu signaled him to wait for the right moment. Eun-yu warned that if Yoon-soo attacked too soon, it could put the lives of the other residents in danger. Yoon-soo had no choice but to await further instructions. Eventually, Eun-yu couldn't contain his emotions anymore when Chong-sop killed Soon-young, who had been struggling in isolation. Shortly after, Ik-young and Sung-guk attempted to distract some of the bandits, enabling Yoon-soo and all the apartment residents to mount a resistance. Unexpectedly, Soon-young returned to life, but she had transformed into a monster, losing all her human memories. She went on a rampage, attacking anyone in her path. Even Eun-yu narrowly escaped, becoming her victim thanks to Yoon-soo's sacrifice. Realizing that Sun-young couldn't be saved, Yoon-soo had to end her life. Unfortunately, this allowed the bandit group, which had been repelled earlier, to regain control as Yoon-soo was now powerless. Meanwhile, Chong-sop, who saw Yoon-soo as a monster, ordered his men to take him to the rooftop for a brutal execution. But unexpectedly, one of the bandits named Yoon-young killed his comrade and threw Chong-sop off the rooftop, leaving only one bandit alive. Yoon-young instructed the remaining bandit to inform everyone about his actions. Yoon-soo was puzzled by Yoon-young's behavior. Eventually, Yoon-young explained that he had only used the bandit group to search for special creatures like himself and Yoon-soo. Yoon-soo still didn't understand Yoon-young's intentions and asked for clarification. Yoon-young revealed that they were special creatures that had evolved beyond humans and that it was inappropriate for them to associate with humans of a significantly lower level. Yoon-soo realized that Yoon-young had a plan to eradicate humans but rejected the idea, expressing that he didn't want to harm humans, even though he was a monster. At the same time, a military helicopter distributed flyers, offering rewards to humans who reported information about special creatures in their area. This would guarantee their safety and transport to a secure evacuation camp. Seeing the flyer made Yoon-soo doubt his decisions. When Yoon-soo returned to the lobby, he met with the apartment residents who were willing to help him. However, Yoon-soo instead instructed them not to harm Yoon-young, claiming that he was his friend. This sudden change raised concerns among the residents, and Yoon-soo privately questioned Yoon-young about his future intentions. Yoon-young explained his desire for revenge against humans due to the cruel treatment he had received, seeing them as nothing more than prey. Yoon-soo became increasingly conflicted about what to do next. A while later, Yoon-soo witnessed the apartment residents killing a jelly-like monster, even though the creature had previously helped a young boy. This event shifted Yoon-soo's perspective. He went from trusting humans to thinking that maybe what Yoon-young had said was true. Yoon-soo even refused to follow Eun-yu's orders to take action. In contrast, Ik-young believed that Yoon-young's presence was dangerous and decided to support the military, giving Eun-yu the tracking device they had provided her. Even though Ik-young desperately wanted to reunite with her fiancé, she left the final decisions to Eun-yu. Realizing the importance of the tracking device, Eun-yu hid it in a drawer. Unbeknownst to them, one of the apartment residents, Hae-rung, overheard their conversation and saw Eun-yu hiding the tracking device. Meanwhile, Jil-sop, as a longtime resident, asked Yu-ri to help him find a tunnel in the apartment that could serve as an escape route in case of trouble. However, Yu-ri realized her asthma inhaler was empty and started gasping for breath. Seeing her unconscious, Sung-guk carried her outside to find asthma medication. But Yoon-young blocked Sung-guk's path, fearing he might report his presence to the military. Yoon-soo intervened and told Yoon-young to stay calm and let Sung-guk go. Yoon-young agreed, allowing Sung-guk to take Yu-ri outside to find her medication. However, once Sung-guk and Yu-ri were outside, Yoon-young shot them, along with other apartment residents. Yoon-soo desperately tried to stop Yoon-young, but Yoon-young's powers were greater, throwing Yoon-soo aside. Yoon-young then revealed that he had revived Sun-young using his abilities. This revelation angered Yoon-soo, and his transformation into a monster was complete. Facing off, Yoon-soo was overwhelmingly powerful and quickly defeated Yoon-young. Later on, Yoon-soo, who had lost consciousness, attempted to attack the other apartment residents. But then, Do-sik arrived, running to wake him up. Do-sik had also been infected by the monster virus and was now able to walk. The scene then shifted to Yu-ri and Sung-guk. Yu-ri, who had been shot, eventually succumbed to her injuries, followed by Sung-guk. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Do-sik also passed away while trying to restrain Yoon-soo. Shortly after, Yoon-soo regained consciousness, but had no memory of the recent events. The next day, the remaining residents faced more grief when they discovered that Gil-sop had also passed away due to exhaustion from digging the tunnel. Despite their sadness, they now had a glimmer of hope because Gil-sop had successfully found the tunnel. Not long after, they received news that the military had surrounded the apartment and demanded their surrender. Eun-yuk, realizing that he hadn't activated the tracking device provided by Ik-yong, searched for it and found that Hae-rung had taken it and activated it for his own selfish reasons. Yoon-soo, aware that he was the one the military wanted, said his goodbyes to everyone as he prepared to turn himself in. Eun-yuk, feeling that there were no other options, instructed the remaining apartment residents to use the tunnel that Gil-sop had found to escape. Inside the tunnel, Eun-yuk couldn't see Yoon-soo and thought of going back, but Eun-yuk stopped her. He promised to bring Yoon-soo back safely, but Eun-yuk was lying because he had already been infected by the monster virus and decided to stay behind. Meanwhile, Yoon-soo seemed to be heading towards the military forces who were getting ready to shoot him. Shortly after, the military started shooting at Yoon-soo, and he fell. Sometime later, the remaining apartment residents found themselves in the middle of the city. They were stopped by the military, who took them into custody. Ik-yong had a conversation with the military commander and then parted ways with the group of remaining apartment residents. She decided to join the military to take action. Meanwhile, it turned out that Yoon-soo was still alive and was being escorted by a military officer. Unexpectedly, the military officer called Yoon-soo's name and revealed himself to be Yoo-im-yong, who had taken over Sunguk's body. On the other hand, there's a mad scientist named Dr. Lim who is obsessed with the monster virus. Dr. Lim, appointed by the government, believes that what is happening now is the world's way of replacing humans who have lived on Earth for too long. The story then turns to Yoon-soo, who is still with Yoo-im-yong. Yoon-soo tries to fight Yoo-im-yong, but Yoo-im-yong is still too strong and overpowers him. Soon, the military realizes that the vehicle carrying Yoon-soo has been hijacked. They make every effort to stop the vehicle, but Yoo-im-yong manages to escape the military's pursuit. On the other hand, there are now only 10 apartment residents left: Eun-yu, Jisoo, Jenod, Hae-rung, Haein, Sungwon, and 2 middle-aged women. After surviving in the apartment, they are being taken by the military to an evacuation camp. The military calls them survivors and shows no mercy if they are suspected of being infected with the monster virus. Unfortunately, the military mistakenly kills a man who has nosebleeds, thinking he's infected, but he actually has leukemia. Then, there's a strange noise from behind some debris, and one of the military units becomes extremely frightened, realizing that a monster is nearby. When the monster appears, the military starts shooting at it, even though their shots miss the monster and hit the survivors. The military doesn't seem to care about human lives anymore. The monster they face is a giant lizard-like creature that doesn't attack anyone. Surprisingly, this lizard-like monster is more compassionate than humans. When the lizard monster sees a little girl crying because she's separated from her mother, it helps the girl find her mother, despite the military shooting at it. Meanwhile, the situation becomes chaotic as the survivors are crowded together. At a certain point, Eun-yu's view of the military changes when she witnesses her 2 middle-aged apartment neighbors becoming victims. A soldier named Chun-young, who seems kind-hearted, notices Eun-yu lagging behind and lost from the group. Despite his superiors urging him to leave quickly, Chun-young reverses the vehicle he's driving, ensuring Eun-yu's survival. Unfortunately, the 2 middle-aged women are left behind, reducing the remaining residents of the Green Home apartment to 8. Eun-yu, who used to be cheerful, undergoes a sudden transformation. She doesn't hesitate to confront Chun-young's superior, insisting that he takes them back to the Green Home apartment because she believes Eun-yu is still alive. On the other hand, we are introduced to a special forces unit called the Crow Unit, which receives a report about the lizard-like monster. The Crow Unit, led by Surgeon In-won, rushes to the location. Upon arrival, In-won and his team are surprised because there are no signs of a monster attack, yet many survivors have died. In-won and his team are experienced in dealing with monsters. He instructs his team to prepare to kill the lizard-like monster by luring it with its offspring. Soon, the lizard-like monster appears, and In-won and his team easily eliminate it. When his deputy named Yong-hoo is about to eliminate the monster's offspring, In-won actually forbids it, stating that their unit was formed to eliminate monsters that pose a threat to humans. However, this leads to a debate because Yong-hoo believes that all monsters should be killed. On the other hand, Yoon-soo has reconciled with Yoo-eum-yong because Yoo-eum-yong is now willing to listen to Yoon-soo and not harm innocent humans recklessly. This becomes evident when Yoo-eum-yong assists someone in need, preventing a monster from attacking them. Meanwhile, Ik-yong, who has joined the military, is observed hijacking a military vehicle to gain entry into a secret research facility known as Bomsung. Coincidentally, Yoo-eum-yong and Yoon-soo are also heading in that direction. Yoo-eum-yong then reveals that Bomsung is where he was once subjected to experiments. However, as Yoo-eum-yong is driving, he starts seeing ghostly images of Yuri because Sunguk is still alive and has forced Yoo-eum-yong out of his body. Yoo-eum-yong is continuously haunted by these apparitions of Yuri, which distracts him and causes his car to swerve. Yoo-eum-yong, who can typically switch bodies at will, finds that this ability isn't working. Even his body, which usually regenerates rapidly, is not responding as usual. Seeing this, Yoon-soo takes charge and drags Yoo-eum-yong along because he has his own mission at Bomsung. Yoon-soo intends to sacrifice his body for research in the hopes of finding a vaccine to stop the monster outbreak. Yoo-eum-yong hears this and pleads with Yoon-soo not to proceed because he believes Yoon-soo's convictions are foolish. However, their progress is abruptly halted as the military opens fire on both of them. Meanwhile, Eun-yu and the others have reached the Green Home apartment. However, the place is in shambles, and despite Yeon-woo's efforts to find Eun-yu, there's no sign of him. Eun-yu remains hopeful that Eun-yu is alive, but Hae-rung supports the military and wrestles Jisoo's weapon away. This leads Chun-yong's superiors to verbally assault Eun-yu and command Chun-yong to tie them up. Chun-yong reluctantly complies with his superior's orders, but secretly loosens Eun-yu's restraints so they can escape. Surprisingly, Mi-young-suk, who had transformed into a cocoon, now awakens in human form. This terrifies Commander Chun-yong, and he strikes Mi-young-suk with a car. Out of nowhere, a blind monster appears and swiftly kills Commander Chun-yong. Eun-yu and the others seize the opportunity to board a bus and leave the area. However, just before departing, another monster shows up and notices Commander Chun-yong. Eun-yu immediately rushes to aid Commander Chun-yong, but Hae-rung intervenes. Fortunately, Commander Chun-yong manages to escape and chases after the bus. Meanwhile, the blind monster, upon hearing Commander Chun-yong approaching, reaches out to attack him. Instead, it gets struck by the bus, sending it flying. As they continue their journey, Commander Chun-yong stops the bus he's driving because a survivor wants to join them. On another place, it appears that Yoon-soo has been captured by the military, where Dr. Lim pressures him to confront a dangerous monster. Yoon-soo, still hopeful that Dr. Lim will use his body for vaccine research, seems to comply with Dr. Lim's instructions to battle the monster before him. Meanwhile, Yoo-eum-yong, thought to be dead by the military, suddenly attacks two doctors who were examining him, kills them, and departs. Returning to Yoon-soo, he's engaged in a battle with the monster, but he doesn't fight back. Surprisingly, when the monster absorbs some of Yoon-soo's blood, it suddenly recollects its human memories and ceases its attack on him. Dr. Lim, who witnesses this, is astounded by Yoon-soo's abilities. However, Dr. Lim instructs his subordinates to eliminate the monster that clashed with Yoon-soo, deeming it worthless. This brings tears to Yoon-soo's eyes as he senses that the monster only desired to heal. Later, Dr. Lim tells Yoon-soo to rest, as he intends to conduct further experiments on him. As he's leaving, Dr. Lim encounters Ik-yong and recognizes her. Dr. Lim soon learns that Ik-yong has come to meet her fiancé, who has been transformed into a monster due to Dr. Lim's experiments, leaving Ik-yong in tears. Back with the apartment residents, they're shown asleep on the bus. Soon, a young boy asks Chun-yong, who is driving, to stop for a moment as he needs to use the bathroom. The young boy, accompanied by Chun-yong, exits the bus, and the young girl hears someone whispering. Upon investigation, she discovers that it's Hae-rung, who has transformed into a monster and immediately attacks the young girl. The other passengers, hearing her screams, rush to her aid and quickly leave the bus because Hae-rung continues to transform into an even more terrifying monster. The male survivor who had joined them earlier pours gasoline to set Hae-rung on fire. However, while attempting to ignite the fire, it becomes apparent that the monster Hae-rung can produce a loud sound, causing everyone to cover their ears. Jisoo, witnessing this, forces herself to light the dropped lighter even though it costs her hearing. Jisoo's sacrifice results in Hae-rung's death in the fire, but sadly, the young girl also perishes in the attack, bringing sadness once again to the group. Now, only 6 apartment residents remain, and their goal is to reach a refugee camp located in the stadium. On the other hand, the South Korean government claimed that the stadium was the safest place left. However, the Prime Minister, now the top leader, had a crazy plan. He wanted to deliberately bring the survivors to the stadium to get Dr. Lim, who believed in eradicating humanity, to provide a vaccine to him and his followers. And it involved eliminating the survivors gathering in the stadium. Dr. Lim, who was indeed insane, agreed to the proposal. Meanwhile, Eun-yu and the others had just reached the stadium, thinking it was a safe place. In-won, who had just received this news, immediately ordered Young-hoo and all the Raven squad to rush to Bomsung, where the Prime Minister was, to stop his crazed actions. Unfortunately, an attack happened first, causing the survivors to scatter in fear and chaos to erupt in the stadium. Thankfully, before things could get worse, In-won arrived and killed the Prime Minister and his men, also detonating the Bomsung Research Center. At the same time, Yoon-soo was confronted by Eun-young, who now fully controlled Sung-dug's body. They engaged in a fierce battle, but Eun-young had the upper hand over Yoon-soo, even turning Yoon-soo's body into a statue. On the other hand, Ik-young, who had left Bomsung, sensed that her baby was about to be born. However, she believed her baby was a monster and didn't want to give birth. Meanwhile, at the stadium, Yeonwoo, who had just regained consciousness, witnessed Jisoo sacrifice herself so the young boy could survive the imminent collapse. Seeing Jisoo gone, Eun-yu felt deep sorrow because Jisoo was her only true friend who understood her. Sometime later, Ik-young realized that her fears about her baby being a monster had come true. She thought about ending her baby's life, but changed her mind when she heard her baby call her Mama. 1 year later, all the surviving survivors were living in the underground ruins of the stadium, and In-won was their leader. Just like in the Green Home apartment, they had strict rules, like checking in every day, and no one was allowed to leave. However, the apartment residents faced discrimination from the other survivors. This happened because Eun-yu was accused of killing Chief Ji's husband. Chief Ji was a highly respected person in the stadium because she had discovered the hidden place beneath the stadium. She was also known for giving jobs to the residents in exchange for batteries, which had become the currency. To make up for her past actions, Eun-yu always followed the orders of Chief Ji's daughter, Ye-sul. Sometime later, the Raven squad faced new challenges because they were running out of food and fuel supplies. This forced them to go on a journey to search for resources. At the same time, Eun-yu, who had changed a lot, secretly left the stadium using a hidden path. 3 other residents noticed her departure and decided to follow her secretly. 2 of them believed that Chief Ji might reward them if they killed Eun-yu. These 2 residents tried to attack Eun-yu, and it led them to an abandoned building. Inside, they came across a girl. When one of the residents touched the girl's hand, he suddenly started acting like a monster without any warning. This made him a target for his own friend, who had also transformed into a monster. Meanwhile, the Raven squad, now led by Young-hoo, got a report that one of their members had gone missing. But they faced another problem as they had to rush back to the stadium because monsters were gathering there suddenly. Eun-yu, who had been trying to hide, was suddenly surrounded by a group of monsters. They were attracted by the gunshots from the resident who was pursuing her. When Eun-yu found herself trapped, a hand that looked like Yoon-soo's reached out to help her. This made her want to catch up with the person who assisted her, thinking it might be Yoon-soo or maybe Eun-yu. Surprisingly, Eun-yu encountered the girl who could turn people into monsters. When the girl saw the man chasing Eun-yu had turned into a monster, Eun-yu tried to attack him. However, Ah-yi intervened and stopped Eun-yu from attacking the transformed man. She explained that the man had already turned into a monster and would obey her commands. Eun-yu noticed that Yi wore a red ribbon just like hers and tried to catch up with her to ask some questions. However, Eun-yu's attempt was thwarted by the giant lizard-like monster that In-won had spared the previous year. Now this lizard monster was protecting Yi. On the other hand, Young-hoo spotted a horde of monsters heading toward the stadium and ordered his team to lure them to a gas station for a controlled explosion. The plan worked, but it came at the cost of losing one of his squad members. This frustrated Young-hoo, especially since In-won insisted on keeping the survivors inside the stadium, despite members of the Raven squad disappearing or getting killed one after another. To add to their troubles, one of the survivors had been infected with the monster virus and needed isolation. On his way back, Young-hoo and his team encountered the infected man and 2 other refugees while chasing after Eun-yu, who was unconscious and in need of medical attention. Surprisingly, Dr. Lim was the one tending to the refugees, and he had managed to survive. Initially bored without any research to conduct, Dr. Lim became excited when he examined the patient brought in by the Raven squad. The patient displayed an anomaly he had never seen before. As Dr. Lim analyzed the patient's blood, he was shocked to discover that the patient had been infected with the monster virus without exhibiting typical symptoms like others. The patient explained that he had contracted the monster's symptoms by accidentally touching the mysterious girl named Yi. Meanwhile, Young-hoo was still worried about one of his missing squad members, Young-suk. He got word that Young-suk had gone looking for medicine to help his seriously ill girlfriend. Young-hoo hoped Young-suk would get in touch so they could pick him up. Meanwhile, Chun-young, in charge of keeping track of the refugees, noticed that 2 of them had disappeared. A pastor told him that he had seen those 2 refugees following Eun-yu and hadn't seen them return. Intrigued, Chun-young approached Eun-yu to ask about it. However, Eun-yu was uncooperative and refused to share any information. While they were talking, Yi came over to meet them. She offered to lead Eun-yu to the person who had always saved her and extended her hand. Eun-yu, unaware of Yi's abilities, innocently reached out to her. But someone from behind warned Eun-yu not to touch Yi's hand, and that was Ik-young. Ik-young approached and revealed that Yi was her daughter. She then took Yi away. Eun-yu, who desperately wanted to meet the monster who had always come to her rescue, chased after Ik-young, with Chun-young following Eun-yu. Unfortunately, they lost their trail and ended up in a minefield. Meanwhile, the man who had shown monster symptoms arrived at the isolation area because his grandmother was quarantined there. At first, he seemed normal, but as time passed, he became aggressive and tragically killed his own grandmother. Afterward, his body disintegrated. Dr. Lim, who witnessed this, promptly reported it to Surgeon In-won. Upon hearing the news, In-won wasted no time and set the isolation area on fire to prevent the other refugees from finding out, which would only add to the panic they were already experiencing due to their many challenges. On the other hand, Chief Ji had a family secret she was keeping. She was livid when she heard that the infected woman had passed away. Chief Ji rushed to her office to take some action. However, she was soon interrupted by Ye-sul. This upset Chief Ji, and she ended up slapping Ye-sul when she tried to enter her office. Meanwhile, Eun-yu was still stuck in the minefield, struggling to climb out. Chun-young appeared interested in Eun-yu and asked her why she always traveled alone. However, Eun-yu requested that Chun-young not get involved in her issues. A little later, someone from above tossed down a rope to help Eun-yu and Chun-young climb out. It was Ho-sung, the long-haired survivor who had been on the bus with them when they were heading to the stadium. Ho-sung was with his daughter, Honey, who immediately developed a crush on Chun-young. Ho-sung, who had lost trust in humans, ended up taking Eun-yu and Chun-young hostage, locking them in a building. However, he promised to let them go eventually. The following day, Dr. Lim continued his investigation into why his patient displayed monster symptoms without any visible signs like the others. He listened to a recording where the man discussed what he had witnessed at Bomsung, prompting him to decide to go there to uncover the cause. On the other hand, Ik-young and Yi were living on a shipwreck. Ik-young was furious when she found out that her daughter had turned someone else into a monster. She recalled the first incident when her daughter had transformed a human into a monster with her touch. Shortly after, Ik-yong smelled something burning, and it turned out that the ship they were staying on was on fire. Yi had intentionally set the ship ablaze as a means of escape. Concerned that Yi might cause trouble again, Ik-yong tried to catch up with her daughter. Unfortunately, she lost her trail. Meanwhile, in the stadium, Young-hoo, who was in the control room, suddenly received an SOS signal from his subordinate, Yong-suk. The coordinates provided by Yong-suk were for the bomb-sewing laboratory. On the other hand, In-won had already shown symptoms of the monster virus and had entered the hallucination phase. Dr. Lim, upon seeing this, stated that he would help In-won as long as he was given permission to leave the stadium. The scene shifts back to Eun-yu, who, with Honey's help, manages to leave the building alone. In a twist of fate, Eun-yu encounters Yi once again, and suddenly Yi pushes her into a ravine. Eun-yu has no choice but to accept her fate. Shortly after, a monster arrives to help her, and it turns out to be Yoon-soo. The story then takes us to the past, when Ik-yong gave birth to Yi, but chose not to kill her. However, Ik-yong had a deep hatred for monsters, so Yoon-soo raised Yi. In just 1 year, Yi grew at an astonishing rate. Ik-yong, who had always watched Yi from a distance, eventually decided to take care of her because she saw no abnormalities in Yi. One day, a group of bandits appeared, targeting Yi, and that's when Yi revealed her power to transform humans into monsters and control them at will. Since then, Ik-yong had been trying to confine Yi because she didn't want Yi to turn people into monsters again. However, this led to Yi developing a deep hatred for humans and a desire to use her power to eliminate them. Back in the present, after Yoon-soo saved Eun-yu, he intended to leave immediately. Eun-yu asked him why he always confused her by saving her and then leaving without a word. Yoon-soo coldly replied that he saved Eun-yu purely by coincidence because he happened to know her. After saying that, Yoon-soo once again intended to leave. However, Eun-yu was not satisfied with Yoon-soo's answer and tried to follow him. But Yoon-soo immediately flapped his wings, causing the ground to melt instantly, indicating that he didn't want Eun-yu to follow him. Despite this, Eun-yu ignored it and continued to move forward, prompting Yoon-soo to flap his wings again. At the same time, Ho-sung quickly stopped Eun-yu and told Yoon-soo to go with Yi. As they walked, Yoon-soo asked Yi why she wanted to hurt Eun-yu. Yi explained that she wanted humans to feel the pain she had felt for a long time, starting with Ik-yong, who had always been mean to her. This made Yoon-soo rush to where he last saw Ik-yong being saved by the baby lizard monster and brought her to safety. Meanwhile, in the stadium, Young-hoo got the coordinates from Yong-suk and originally planned to go by himself, but In-won suggested he bring some of the best soldiers because it might be dangerous. In-won also offered to take care of security at the stadium. Young-hoo decided to take 5 soldiers, including himself and Dr. Lim, who wanted to join them. On the way, Dr. Lim suddenly needed to use the bathroom, so Young-hoo asked one of his soldiers to accompany him. Shortly after, they noticed a group of monsters approaching and quickly left because there were too many of them. Young-hoo felt that these monsters were acting strangely, cooperating instead of acting on their own like they usually did. Not long after, Young-hoo and his team reached Bomsong. They split into 2 groups because Young-hoo needed to accompany Dr. Lim to enter the laboratory first to retrieve his research materials. Meanwhile, in the stadium, the refugees and the Crow Squad suddenly felt and heard the presence of a monster nearby. Chief Ji, who seemed to know something, then told her daughter to take action. In the control room, the guards suddenly lost all connections, indicating the presence of a monster in the stadium. In-hwa realized something was wrong and immediately ordered all the troops to gather the refugees and Chief Ji. In-won's motive was that he believed one of the refugees had shown symptoms of the monster plague in its final stage. After everyone gathered, In-hwa instructed everyone to injure their own hands. If the wound healed, it meant the person was infected, and they would be executed. To be fair, In-hwa ordered all his troops to do it first, but Chief Ji saw In-hwa doing it and asked him to injure his hand, as well to ensure whether he was still human or not. Previously, Inhua had already shown symptoms of the monster plague and had even entered the hallucination stage. Inhua then wounded his hand and showed the wound to the refugees. However, when the wound regenerated, the lights suddenly went out, making it impossible for anyone to see whether Inhua's wound had healed. On the other hand, the group searching for Yang-suk faced an unexpected attack, and sadly, one of the soldiers lost their life. The remaining 2 soldiers were left bewildered because they couldn't communicate with Young-hoo. Meanwhile, Young-hoo had already reached Dr. Lim's laboratory. They were both amazed when they saw a giant cocoon about to hatch. Young-hoo sensed increasing danger and urgently ordered his troops and Dr. Lim to catch up with the others. However, Dr. Lim chose to stay behind. Feeling that it was no longer his concern, Young-hoo left Dr. Lim alone. With Dr. Lim seemed excited as he observed the phenomenon unfolding in his laboratory. At the same time, Eun-yu and Chun-young were still with Ho-sung when Yoon-soo arrived carrying Ik-young. Yoon-soo asked for their help to save Ik-young. Ho-sung, who didn't trust Yoon-soo, shot him, which angered Eun-yu. She and Chun-young then left to rescue Ik-young. Back at the stadium, Chief Ji encountered Sung-won, a survivor from the Green Home apartments. She asked for his help, but he was wary of her and initially refused. However, Chief Ji threatened to report Sung-won because he had been infected with the monster virus. Reluctantly, Sung-won agreed to assist Chief Ji. Their plan was to enter a secret corridor by pretending to fix electrical wiring. However, when they reached the door, Chief Ji pushed Sung-won down, intending to use him as a sacrifice for the monster she had secretly kept in the stadium. Meanwhile, 2 soldiers at Bomsung noticed that many monsters had been deliberately gathered. They saw humans and chased after them, only to find themselves trapped in a room. On the other hand, Young-hoo and his men arrived at a medical supply room. They discovered a frightened girl in a cabinet, and Young-hoo offered her his jacket for comfort. The girl led Young-hoo to where Yang-suk was. The scene then shifts back to Yoon-soo and the others, who had reached the hospital. Chun-young, with some medical knowledge, searched for an oxygen tank to help Ik-young, who was in critical condition. Unfortunately, all the oxygen tanks were empty, and there was no way to save her. Yoon-soo realized that Ik-young had intentionally stayed in the burning building from the beginning to escape the suffering of the world. He hurriedly went to Oh-yi to inform her about her mother's condition. At first, Oh-yi appeared indifferent to Ik-young's fate, but Yoon-soo warned her that she might regret it someday if she continued to act that way. Oh-yi then held Yoon-soo's hand, and together they went to the hospital where Ik-young was, accompanied by Eun-yu and Chun-young. When they arrived, Yoon-soo asked Eun-yu and Chun-young to leave so Oh-yi could be with her mom during her final moments. Alone in the room, Oh-yi used her power to transform Ik-young into a monster. Realizing this, Yoon-soo transformed into his own monster form to stop Ik-young, who had lost her humanity. In the end, Yoon-soo had to reluctantly kill someone he cared about. Meanwhile, Young-hoo and his team finally found Yang-suk, but his condition looked dire. Sensing something was wrong, Young-hoo asked the girl to show him if there were any other survivors. At the same time, Dr. Lim was approached by a man who told him to follow. It soon became clear to Young-hoo that the girl and the survivors there were experimental humans with monster abilities who retained their human memories. Unfortunately, they were ambushed, and all of Young-hoo's team fell victim to the attack. Returning to Yoon-soo, he was deeply affected by Ik-young's death. However, Eun-yu, who had been waiting, sensed that something was wrong with Yoon-soo. When she confronted him, she discovered that Yoon-soo was now fully controlled by his other personality. Meanwhile, in Bomsung, the man who had met Dr. Lim turned out to be Yoon-young. He revealed that all his plans were now ready to exterminate all humans completely. The Sweet Home series concluded by revealing that the monster cocoon in Dr. Lim's laboratory had hatched, and the creature inside was Eun-yu. Moral lesson from the story: if someone offers you a hand in friendship, make sure they're not secretly a monster, or you might end up turning into one yourself.